Welcome to the Chemistry, Biology and Math Revision Hub. Today we are doing the IGCSE biology topics. This is blood and circulation. The circulatory system sustains life and it facilitates the transport of vital substances throughout the body. It delivers oxygen and nutrients to the cells. It transports important substances like hormones and antibodies. It removes waste products like carbon dioxide from the lungs as well as urea from the kidneys. It also helps to regulate body temperature as well as pH balance. It contains a complex network of blood vessels as well as the heart, and this ensures that the cells receive the necessary components to function efficiently and to maintain overall homeostasis. If the circulatory system is not functioning properly, the cells will not receive the nutrients as well as oxygen required to make energy that is needed to eliminate harmful substances, as well as enabling them to function properly, so there will be organ failure, and this could lead to death. When we talk about the circulatory system, we consider unicellular as well as multicellular organisms. We'll begin with the unicellular organisms. So single-celled organisms like amoeba, paramecium, and egg liner we've seen here have no circulatory system, and this is because they are single cells, they have a large surface area to volume ratio, and it's easier for substances to diffuse into them. The diffusing substances include oxygen, the nutrients, as well as the waste going out. But for multicellular organisms, because they have a low surface area to volume ratio, they require a system that can distribute these nutrients within the organism, as well as taking out waste. So, meaning they require a circulatory system. In a single circulatory system, an example is within fish. Here we see blood from the rest of the body, meaning deoxygenated blood is going to return to the heart. In the heart, we're going to pump it and it will go to the gills, where gaseous exchange is going to occur. Oxygen is going to enter the blood and carbon dioxide is going to get out of the blood vessels. And then oxygenated blood is going to go to the rest of the body. So the key thing is blood travels through the heart once, while in double circulatory system, we see blood coming from the rest of the body, meaning from the body organs. It comes into the heart. It's going to be pumped to the lungs to get oxygen, and then oxygenated blood returns to be pumped to go back to the rest of the body. Double circulatory system is more efficient than the single one, since blood can reach the organs at a higher pressure and it travels more quickly, so organs can receive oxygenated blood as well as nutrients in order to carry out respiration. In single circulatory system, because blood leaves the heart and goes to the lungs, there is going to be a decrease in blood pressure, so there may not be high enough efficiency in the transfer of oxygen to the organs. So I'm going to focus more on double circulatory system. Like we said already, this is where blood comes through the heart twice. This is broken down into pulmonary circulation as well as systemic circulation. So we can write this as pulmonary. This came from a different language, so in English it's just pulmonary. I'll show you the structure of the heart with the correct labels that are in English. Focusing on pulmonary circulation, this is when blood leaves the right side of the heart. From the right ventricle, it goes to the lungs, where it's going to be oxygenated, and then it leaves the lungs, returns to the left part of the heart, where it's going to be pumped in order to go to the rest of the body. So this part of circulation is called pulmonary circulation. And systemic circulation is when blood comes from the rest of the body, returns into the heart, and then being pumped from the heart to the rest of the body. So systemic is to do with the body systems, whereas pulmonary is to do with the lungs. So this is the structure of the heart. You need to remember that the heart has 4 chambers. We have the right atrium, we have the right ventricle, the left atrium, as well as the left ventricle. We have valves. For example, here we have the tricuspid valve, and this side we have the bicuspid valve. Those are the atrioventricular valves, connecting the atria to the ventricles. And then we have the aortic valve, through which the blood goes to the aorta. And there is the pulmonary valve, through which blood leaves the right ventricle to go to the pulmonary arteries. So this blood vessel here is the pulmonary artery. There are 2, one leading to one lung and the other leading to the next lung. Then we have the aorta, which is the major blood vessel through which blood is going to subdivide and go to the rest of the body. When we talk about the heart, we talk about the septum, this part that divides the heart into the 2 sections, the left and the right. It's there to prevent the mixing of oxygenated and deoxygenated blood. There is another blood vessel called the vena cava. This brings blood from the rest of the body into the right atrium. It's broken down into the inferior as well as the superior. the superior leading blood from the head as well as the arms towards the right atrium, and the inferior vena cava leading blood from the rest of the body, meaning the lower part of the body, into the heart. So you need to know the structure of the heart as well as the functions of the different components in order to be able to answer questions that will require you to label as well as give reasons. Exam questions could ask you the adaptations of the structure of the heart to its function. Remember, it is divided into the left and right side by the muscle called the septum, like I already said. This makes sure oxygenated blood and deoxygenated blood do not mix. And it has valves. This ensures that blood can flow only in one direction. The walls of the atria are thin, and they can be stretched to receive blood coming into the heart and can contract enough to push blood through the bicuspid as well as the tricuspid valves in order to enter into the ventricles. Also, the walls of the heart are made up of the cardiac muscle, which can contract and relax continuously without fatiguing. Also, the cardiac muscle has its own blood supply. The coronary arteries are present, so we'll talk about this later. These are connected to capillaries within the heart, and these enable that oxygenated blood is delivered to the heart muscle, carrying nutrients as well as oxygen for aerobic respiration to occur, providing enough ATP that is required for the muscle contraction within the heart. The next part is about describing double circulation. At IGCSE, you could ignore these words used like systole as well as diastole. Systole is basically contraction, diastole is relaxation, but we can ignore those, and I'm just going to narrate how the process goes. You need to remember that processes occur at the same time, meaning the right atrium as well as the left atrium fill at the same time. So I'm going to describe this double circulation as if both are filling at the same time. So deoxygenated blood from the rest of the body will enter the right atrium through the vena cava. Also, oxygenated blood from the lungs is going to enter the left atrium through the pulmonary vein. The blood in the atria cannot flow into the ventricles immediately because of the valves that are present. So the atria have to contract. The contraction creates pressure that pushes the valves to open so that blood can leave the atria to go into the ventricles. When the ventricles are full, they're going to contract, creating a pressure that forces the semilunar valves to open. The semilunar valves, I'm talking about the pulmonary valve as well as the aortic valves, the ones we saw previously. Those are going to open so that the oxygenated blood from the left ventricle goes through the aorta, and the deoxygenated blood from the right ventricle goes through the pulmonary artery. The deoxygenated blood through the pulmonary artery can go to the lungs, as the oxygenated blood through the aorta can go to the rest of the body. Next, we go to coronary heart disease. Like we said already, the heart contains coronary arteries, and these provide oxygenated blood to the heart muscle. But the coronary arteries are very narrow. They're one of the narrowest arteries within the body, so they can easily be blocked by the buildup of fatty substances like cholesterol, as we see here. These are lipid deposits. They can block the blood vessels, preventing efficient distribution or supply of oxygenated blood and nutrients to the heart muscle, and that is going to hinder aerobic respiration, so there'll be less ATP provided for muscle contraction. When this occurs, the heart muscle will not contract efficiently and the person can have a heart attack. This could lead to many health complications as well as death. Factors that could lead to coronary heart disease, and these will be asked in the exams, they include genetics, meaning some people have genes that already make them genetically predisposed to getting coronary heart disease. The next one is high blood pressure, which strains the heart. There is diet. If we eat foods that are rich in saturated fats, this raises the blood cholesterol levels. Also, there is smoking. This raises blood pressure and increases the chances of forming blood clots. There is stress, which raises blood pressure, and if blood pressure is high, of course, there is going to be damage to the arteries. There is lack of exercise. Regular exercise reduces blood pressure, leading to the strengthening of the heart. The next part is looking at how the heart rate is controlled. Remember, within the heart, we have the pacemaker region, and this is the region that causes a stimulation of the heart muscle so that it can beat appropriately. However, the resting heart rate is about 70 beats per minute, which is quite lower if somebody is carrying out intense exercise. So the brain is involved in stimulating the heart to beat a little bit more. Within the heart, there are receptors, like we see this one here and here. They detect changes, maybe carbon dioxide concentration, blood pH, blood pressure, and so on, and they send impulses to the brain in the area called the medulla that contains the cardiac control center. The cardiac control center sends nerve impulses through an accelerator nerve. It's going to cause this region to stimulate the heart more, meaning more electrical stimulation is going to go to the heart muscle, making the heart muscle beat faster, getting rid of carbon dioxide by pumping more deoxygenated blood to the lungs so that more carbon dioxide can be removed. But this part here is rarely asked at IGCSE level, although it's in your textbook, so I had to explain it. Also, other hormones like adrenaline from the adrenal glands can stimulate this region, causing the heart to beat faster in order to return the blood conditions to normal. Next, we go to blood vessels. Blood vessels include arteries, capillaries, as well as veins. The arteries carry blood away from the heart to organs. When blood moves through the arteries, it's at high pressure. Arteries have a small lumen. They have elastic tissue to stretch and recoil it back in shape. They have thick muscular walls to control blood flow by dilating, meaning widening, as well as constriction, returning or narrowing back into their original shape. So these adaptations within the arteries make them suitable for transportation of blood, which is oxygenated at high pressure, to the rest of the body. When we go to the veins carry blood from organs back to the heart. The blood moves through the veins at lower pressure, and the veins have wider lumen. We can see the lumens are bigger. So because they carry blood at low pressure, it's going to be harder for the blood to be returned to the heart. So we see presence of valves. These prevent the backflow of blood. And also the veins have thinner walls and the walls are less elastic. If we compare these walls to that, we can see the arteries are thicker in comparison to the veins, and the thickness here is to withstand pressure, meaning in the arteries, while in the veins, the walls are thinner because blood is not going to be traveling at a high pressure. Going to the capillaries. Capillaries carry blood through organs by bringing the blood closer to cells. They are small enough to fit between cells, so the materials can pass through the capillaries or the cells of the capillaries to go to the tissues that are nearby. These capillaries are also one cell thick, meaning the distance that the substances are going to diffuse is going to be shorter, so materials move out to the nearby cells within a shorter period of time. Next, we go to the components of blood. These include plasma as well as blood cells. Plasma is a liquid part of blood and is going to be composed mainly of water. The plasma is going to be the media for transportation of the substances that are contained within the blood. For example, it transports blood cells around the body. It carries dissolved nutrients, hormones, carbon dioxide, urea, and so on to the rest of the body, and it distributes heat around the body. We can see there are also some cells like red blood cells. There are also white blood cells, for example, phagocytes as well as lymphocytes. And there are some platelets, which are blood cells we're going to look at later. So beginning with blood cells, the first one is going to be red blood cells. We can see the shape is biconcave and they look like discs. They have no nucleus. The lack of a nucleus enables them to have a large surface area to volume ratio to pack up a lot of hemoglobin in order to transport more oxygen. They also have a thin shape to provide a shorter distance for diffusion. Within a small volume of blood, there are millions of these red blood cells, meaning a lot of them can be packed within a small volume in order to transport a lot of oxygen. They contain hemoglobin that loads oxygen in the lungs and unloads oxygen in the tissues. These red blood cells are made in the bone marrow, and they live for about 100 to 120 days, and they are destroyed in the spleen. The hemoglobin contained within these red blood cells loads oxygen in the lungs, and when oxygen combines with hemoglobin, we produce oxyhemoglobin. Also, the oxyhemoglobin is going to be converted into hemoglobin and oxygen in the tissues where oxygen is going to be lost to the tissues. The other cells we're going to look at are white blood cells, and the first kind are the phagocytes. The phagocytes are the ones that carry out phagocytosis, whereby they produce extensions of their cytoplasm in order to surround pathogens as well as some organisms that are not part of the body, and then they release digestive enzymes in the process of phagocytosis. So an example is when there is a particle here, the extension of the cytoplasm is created around the particle and then completely engulfed. And again, this example here could be food, but this could also be a pathogen in case of phagocytosis within the body cells. So this is going to be surrounded, and then digestive enzymes are going to be released, which are going to digest the pathogen, and the pathogen is going to be broken down. The phagocyte could use the components that have been broken down, or it could release them into the blood. The next type of white blood cells are lymphocytes. They secrete chemicals called antibodies. These are proteins that are soluble in the blood. These antibodies act against pathogens like bacteria and viruses within the body because they have ability to mark the antigens on the surface of those pathogens. Because antibodies are complementary to the antigens on the pathogen, they do stick onto them and cause their destruction. Antibodies work by causing the pathogens to stick together so phagocytosis can occur efficiently. This means they cause the pathogens to agglutinate so that a lot of them can be consumed by the process of phagocytosis. They also label pathogens, meaning once the antibodies are stuck onto the antigen of the pathogen, it means the phagocytes are going to recognize those pathogens easily and their destruction is going to be carried out faster. They also cause the pathogens to burst open. This is because some of these antibodies cause the cells to take up more water. I'm talking about the cells of the pathogens to take up more water, and due to the excess uptake of water, they burst open and they're going to be destroyed. And also, these antibodies neutralize toxins that are produced by the pathogens, thereby protecting the body from harm. Next, we look at immunity. Here we're going to be focusing more on the lymphocytes as well as memory cells. During immune response, we have some lymphocytes. Some participate in the production of antibodies, leading to the destruction of pathogens, while others do not participate in that process, and these are going to be transformed into memory cells. The memory cells remain in the blood for longer periods of time, and if reinfection occurs, they produce antibodies to deal with the pathogen in a faster and more efficient way. This is when secondary immune response is initiated. Memory cells can be produced if somebody has ever been exposed to the pathogen or if vaccination occurred. So when we look at this is initial exposure. The antibody concentration that is produced is quite less in concentration. We can see it's just here, and it takes a longer period of time for a lower concentration of antibodies to be reached. While if somebody has been vaccinated before, or if it's their second encounter to this pathogen, the antibody concentration is going to be so high within a shorter period of time, so secondary immune response is going to be faster and more efficient. So vaccination creates immunity to a disease-causing microorganism without having encountered the pathogen. During vaccination, an agent that carries the same antigen as the pathogen is injected. Lymphocytes will recognize the antigen and produce antibodies. Some of the lymphocytes are going to become memory cells that remain in the blood. And if this person is infected with a pathogen, secondary immune response takes place and it's going to be faster, producing greater volumes or concentrations of antibodies. Common vaccinations include examples of scenarios where they use weakened strain of the actual microorganism. We see that in polio as well as measles and tuberculosis. Sometimes they use dead microorganisms, like in whooping cough and typhoid. In other cases, they used modified toxins, like in tetanus and diphtheria. And sometimes they just use the antigen, like we see in influenza. Lastly, we're going to look at platelets. This is the third example, blood cells. Platelets are fragments of cells, and they help repair damaged tissues in case of cuts. When the open skin is exposed to air, this stimulates the platelets and the damaged tissue to produce chemicals. These chemicals make the soluble plasma protein fibrinogen to be converted into insoluble fibrin. The fibrin creates a mesh-like structure like we see here around the wound, and this is going to trap the blood cells, usually the red blood cells. This forms a clot that prevents further loss of blood and entry of pathogens. So this clot is going to develop into a scab that protects the damaged tissue as skin grows beneath it. So this brings us to the end of this video on blood and circulation. Thank you for being with us. Do not forget to subscribe. See you in the next video. Bye-bye.